Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tammy Stackelhaus, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with FibroFog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast with Tammy Stackelhaus, episode 18. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tammy Stackelhaus. In today's episode, we are going to be answering the questions you all have been sending in about the use of CBD for fibromyalgia. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I have another listener shout out for you. This one is from Elizabeth, who is actually in Italy. She says, "Dear Tammy, thank you for this inspiring podcast series. This is life-changing for me after having just discovered that I have a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. Thank you very much for all of your information and offering hope to people all over the world." Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I love this, and I love that I'm hearing from somebody on the other side of the world. It's so amazing to me that the world is getting so much smaller and that I am able to help someone that I, not that long ago wouldn't have been able to because you were clear over there. So thank you again so much. Now, for those of you who are curious, like I was, I actually just took a look. And so far, this podcast has been heard in 56 countries around the world. That just boggles my mind. I would love to hear from more of you who are outside the US with what you think of the podcast and what you would like for me to talk about in future episodes. You can reach out on Facebook. You can leave us a review or comments on Apple Podcast, or reach us through the website at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Now on to today's episode. I have been getting a lot of questions through our Ask the Coach page about using CBD for fibromyalgia. A lot of people are wondering if it's helpful, if it's legal, and what the differences are between the CBD products that you might see at your local drugstore and medical marijuana or cannabis. We're going to cover all of that here today. And instead of trying to do this all myself in an Ask the Coach episode, I decided that a better option would actually be to ask the experts. So I have someone who is a fibromyalgia specialist. I have a fibromyalgia patient and a doctor who has created her own line of hemp-based CBD products. And that's not actually a panel of 3 different people. That is one person, my very good friend, Dr. Ginevra Liptan. For those of you who don't know her, Dr. Liptan is a graduate of Tufts University School of Medicine and is board certified in internal medicine. She also trained as a functional medicine doctor, which is a holistic approach that blends both Western and alternative medicine. You can hear more from her in episode 5, and part of her story is that she developed fibromyalgia as a medical student. She spent many years using herself as a guinea pig and trying to find successful treatments and ways that first off, she could help herself, but also then helping her patients. In turn, she has now fine-tuned her approach by treating thousands of patients. She is one of the few clinical specialists in the world who focuses solely on fibromyalgia. She is the medical director of the Frida Center for Fibromyalgia in Portland, Oregon. She's the author of the Fibro Manual, the Fibro Food Formula, and Figuring Out Fibromyalgia. Watching her patients try CBD products with mixed success has led her to develop her own line of CBD products, Frida Botanicals. You can find her on YouTube, Facebook, and on her blog at drliptan.com. And as always, you will find all of the links, all of the products mentioned in this episode at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/18 for episode 18. I'm also super excited to announce that we are doing a giveaway for this episode. We are going to be giving away a bundle of the Frida Botanicals products that we mention on this episode. Stay tuned until the end of the episode. After my interview with Dr. Liptan, I will tell you how you can enter to win. And now, on to our interview. All right, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me this week.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I've gotten a lot of questions. I think I told you this when I asked you to be here, but I've had a lot of questions that have been sent in the Ask the Coach about CBDs for fibromyalgia. And I thought, what better person to ask about this than a fibromyalgia specialist who has fibromyalgia and also happens to have her own line of CBD products. So here you are.
Yes, well, thank you. I get a lot of questions about CBD too. That's actually how I got into like the CBD business, as I got so many questions, and I was like wondering how can I make sure people are getting good access to good types of CBD. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that people are wondering about, and like, could it help me? And if so, how should I do it?
Absolutely. So I think a great place for us to start with all of this is actually just with some definitions, like defining the terms. And so let's just talk a little bit about what CBD even is. What do those letters even stand for? And also talk a little bit about medical marijuana, about cannabis, because I see a lot of people either thinking that they're the same thing or thinking that they're two totally separate things, and neither case is quite right. So why don't you start with that?
Okay. I agree. It is something that people seem to be very confused about, and not just lay people. Sometimes I hear doctors referring to CBD and cannabis as the same thing, and that is definitely not accurate. So it is really important to just start with definitions first. So CBD stands for cannabidiol, which is one of the active ingredients in marijuana or cannabis. The main active ingredient we think about is THC, which is the psychoactive component. That's the part that makes you feel high, kind of gives your mood alteration effects. That's what recreational users of marijuana are seeking, is that brain effect. CBD is a non-psychoactive component of cannabis. So it doesn't affect your brain. It doesn't make you feel high. It does affect your body, and we'll talk about the effects that it can have, but it doesn't alter your thinking. And so because of that, CBD is not considered a drug of abuse or something that can be, it's not addictive. So CBD on its own is considered very safe. And the challenge becomes people mislabel. They say cannabis equals CBD, and that's not the case. CBD is something that is derived from the cannabis plant, but it can also be manufactured in the laboratory. So it's a molecule that can be made or extracted. It's also something that naturally occurs in cannabis plants. So the big distinction of where things get really confusing for folks is the difference between hemp and cannabis. So cannabis, marijuana, is it's a legal gray zone there, because it's federally still considered illegal, a drug of abuse. In many states, it's legal. So if you're getting CBD that's derived from the cannabis plant, from the marijuana plant, it potentially, depending on where you live, could be illegal. Now, if you get CBD that's from the hemp plant, which is a type of cannabis, but it is a different breed. So here's the best analogy. You know how when you look at dogs, they're all the same species, but there's different breeds. And you recognize that a poodle looks different from a chihuahua. Well, hemp and marijuana are two different breeds of the same species of cannabis. So hemp has been bred to have very low or no THC and high CBD. And because of that distinction, if you get CBD that's sourced from hemp, it is considered legal in all 50 states because hemp is legal in all 50 states. So when you're talking about CBD, it's just the molecule. And when you're talking about where it's sourced from, it's usually referred to as hemp-based CBD or marijuana-based CBD. I don't know why the confusion exists, other than I think there's so many different, there's a lot of legal confusion about it. And so maybe that's why people are kind of throwing around the wrong terms.
And I think too that there's not a lot of education on this either. Like it's something that a lot of people don't even want to talk about, right?
And doctors feel uncomfortable. A lot of doctors feel uncomfortable, so they don't know much about it. In fact, I was at a conference recently where there was a CBD, pretty large company that does CBD, and one of their representatives was at the FDA advisory hearings. There was recently some hearings about CBD in front of the FDA. And they said that even some doctors, when they were presenting to the FDA, were using the wrong word. We're saying cannabis when they meant CBD and vice versa. So it was completely confusing the discussion because CBD is legal in all 50 states. Cannabis is not legal in all 50 states. But yet they were throwing around the terms, and it was completely, and these were doctors. I mean, it was just like, no. So I think there's just not good enough scientific understanding or I don't know. I can't quite, like, to me, it seems really clear. So I'm not quite sure where the confusion is, but that's why I keep talking about different ways and writing blog posts and stuff. Cause I'm trying to educate both doctors if they have some confusion about it, and also patients, cause we really have to become self-educated.
Right. I love your dog species analogy. And I think that like we can carry that through a little bit further, even like some say you live in an apartment complex. Some apartment complexes might not allow you to have a dog such as a pit bull or a Doberman, right? Now, those of us who are dog lovers, we know it's the training, not so much the dog, but follow me with this analogy for a moment.
I'm seeing where you're going. I think this is good.
So, maybe these dogs are a little bit more dangerous, but your apartment complex is probably going to let you have your little tiny teacup poodle that's smaller than my cat.
Exactly. So hemp is the little teacup poodle, which is legal and then the Rottweiler is the marijuana, which may or may not be allowed or legal, and which you have to be careful with. I mean, that's the thing about psychoactive medications like that is, I mean, certainly that can have a role in managing pain. THC, the active ingredient, can be really, really helpful, but it can give you mind alterations. I had a patient that told me, when I use THC, I feel great. My pain is much better, but I just lay on the couch all day feeling high. And that's not really what I'm trying to go for, because I want to be able to like lower my pain so that I can work, not so that I can just, kind of vegetate on the couch. And I think that's that's the challenge with THC, is that how do you get it so it's not mind altering for you, so you can still be functional. And the drug companies, believe me, are trying to find THC derivatives that might have less psychoactive effect, because it's a really good pain medication. It does lower pain levels for sure, but we have to find a way to do it that doesn't alter your thinking as much. And interestingly, CBD, when it's taken along with THC, so kind of equal ratio cannabis strains, the CBD kind of counteracts some of the psychoactivity from THC. so people don't get as high or as altered from it, but still get the pain relief. So
that's interesting. And, if we're being fair here, like the opium poppy is another good analogy. Like our drug companies have been able to figure out how to give us some things like tramadol and Vicodin and that kind of stuff, which is a derivative of those opiates.
Yep.
And some of those, like you get into heavier doses of those and you have the same thing where you have trouble thinking and you're tired and you're sitting on the couch. So, I personally am looking forward to the day where we start seeing this in a similar light, because there's a great area here where we can find some pain relief for patients. But we've got to figure it out a little.
We do. And there is a huge, with the kind of shift in thinking around opioid medications, there is a huge amount of money being poured into researching both cannabis-derived medications that maybe do it better with less psychoactivity, but also looking at better opioids that maybe have less addiction or respiratory suppression, less dangerous opioids. Because opioids also are really good pain medications. They're imperfect. They're not perfect tools. They have some issues. So I am hopeful that in the next decade or so, the drug companies will figure some better options out. But in the meantime, patients are kind of left in this like, well, okay, what do I do to manage my pain? My doctor doesn't want to prescribe opioids or tramadol for me anymore. I live in a state where marijuana is not legal, or like I work at a job where I can't have THC in my system. So what do I do? And this is why I think so many questions come up about CBD. I also get a lot of questions about kratom. You probably get a lot of questions about kratom too, because people are looking for alternatives that they can access because they don't have good options, which is really, really infuriating to me that we just have, it's 2019. How do we not have better options?
Right. Oh my gosh. So true. So true. So would you say then that when people are looking at all of the CBD products that are starting to pop up out there, are they mostly hemp based then, or is it a combination?
It's a combination. If you go into a dispensary, so I live in Oregon. You used to live in Oregon before you deserted us. Now you live in Washington, where they also have dispensaries. If you go into a medical marijuana dispensary, any CBD that you purchase from there is going to be derived from the marijuana, from the Rottweiler plant that is more likely to have THC in it. And for some people, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, let's say, a tincture that has 30 milligrams of CBD and 5 milligrams of THC. And if you're looking for anything that has THC in it, you're going to find it in the dispensary, and it's going to be marijuana derived. If you're looking for hemp-based CBD, you're going to find that sold over the counter, so not in the dispensaries. It's sold in, it's sold in New Seasons and a lot of health food stores. I think some pharmacies are starting to carry it, like Walgreens, CVS. And that is hemp derived, meaning it's coming from the breed of marijuana plant that has been bred into a new species called hemp that has no to little THC. And that's how you can sell it legally over the counter at a drugstore, where you can't go into your Walgreens and say, yes, I'd like some of that marijuana, please. And then the hemp-based CBD, I feel like is a good place for people to start, because you know that you're not going to have any effect of THC. There's sometimes microscopic amounts of THC in it, but it has to be sold as hemp-based CBD. It has to have less than 0.03% of THC. So it's basically zero. You're not going to have any psychoactive effect from it. So I think that's a really good place for people to start, because it's kind of predictable. You can kind of know how you're going to react to it. It's easier to access because you can get it online. You can get it, in a retail store. You don't have to go into a dispensary. You don't have to have a card. It tends to be cheaper Anything derived from marijuana tends to be more expensive. And a lot of dispensaries don't accept credit cards. It's all cash based, and it can make people feel a little uncomfortable sometimes having to go into that environment. So I think hemp-based CBD is easier, it's more predictable, it's safer, and it's kind of a good place to start. I find hemp-based CBD to be really good for sleep, for relaxation, for muscle relaxation, for nerve pain, for anxiety. It is not a strong analgesic, meaning pain blocker. If you're looking for pain blocking effects, you're going to want something that has more of the THC. But if you're looking for something to help you sleep, help you feel less anxious, help you feel less tight, that fibromyalgia kind of tightness, the fight or flight nervous system, muscle relaxation, nerve, if you have burning kind of nerve or nerve pain, that's where I think CBD really shines. And by that, I mean hemp-based CBD, simply because it's easiest to access.
And for people who might be thinking, hemp and, we're only seeing this in these things, I want you to know that you probably have products in your house that have hemp in them. It is used in cosmetics. It is used in textiles. You can buy, clothes made out of hemp. It's used in paper and stationery.
They make hemp milk now.
Yep.
Instead of almond milk, they have like hemp seed milk, which has no THC, but it comes from the hemp plant. Yep.
Yep. And I even bought some hemp seeds, roasted hemp seeds at Costco once, to sprinkle on your yogurt or your cereal. By the way, they taste a little like pumpkin seeds, in case anybody's wondering.
That's a good taste. Yeah, I think I've had those as well. And they're a good source of, your omega-3 and 6 fatty acids. Yeah, we use hemp in a lot of things. And that, my friend, is why hemp is legal in all 50 states, is because it's grown for industrial purposes, for food purposes. So it's really, the same base plant, but it's been bred into a form that can be used more for industrial uses. It has more of the ropey, fibrous material. And as part of that, they bred out the THC and boosted the CBD.
So maybe instead of our little teacup poodle, maybe it's a I don't know, a shepherd of some kind, a farm dog.
A sheepdog, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. Think of the rope, the long, yeah, but gentle.
Yes, exactly. So I know one of the things that another thing that people a lot of times are confused about or have questions about is that they hear CBD, they think vaping, but that is just a tiny, tiny piece of how you can use it. And honestly, not my favorite. I have asthma, so vaping is a no-go, but I love salves. So why don't you talk a little bit about those and how they're used and what gives people what kind of effects?
Sure. There's actually a lot of different ways that people can use CBD as a medicine. So vaping is one, and I agree with you. As a doctor, I have a really hard time recommending that people put anything in their lungs, because even if you don't have asthma, it's not. Inhaling foreign substances into your lungs is generally inflammatory. But some people find it works really well for them, and that's okay, as long as you don't have asthma or emphysema or something. So you can vape CBD, which is basically inhaling it at a high temperature that is, it's vaporized. So it's not a smoke that you're inhaling. It's a vapor, and that's safer on the lungs. The benefit to that method is that it's quick acting, and it's fairly predictable as far as your effect, but it's also going to be in and out of your system fairly quickly. It's not very long lasting. You can take it orally, so you can take CBD in like gel caps or little tablets. You can do sublingual oils, things under the tongue. You can do water-based things under the tongue or sprays in the mouth. And I'll talk a little about kind of the pros and cons of each of that in a second. But then you can also rub it on topically. And the great thing about that is you get zero brain effects, no psychoactive effects at all, but you can get localized pain relief. So I was honestly really surprised the first time. It was probably like, what, 5 or 6 years ago, that I learned that you could apply cannabis topically and get pain relief. So both THC and CBD have good topical pain relieving effects. And I remember just being like, what? Like, I'd never heard this, but it actually absorbs really well into our fatty tissue and then right down into the fascia, the kind of painful muscle and nerve area that tends to bother us in fibromyalgia. So it is by far my favorite method of administration because you can localize it, you can really control it, and there's zero potential for any medication interactions, for any side effects, for any systemic or brain effects, because you're only going to get it locally. You have to make sure you get one that smells good.
Yes.
Spraying it or rubbing it on. I've had ones that smell smell a lot like marijuana. And I had a patient that was like, I kind of smell like I've been bathing in bong water. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not what you don't want to go to work smelling like, marijuana. So most of the hemp-based CBD topical salves have other herbs or scents in them, essential oils. So it'll be like minty or lavendery, and some of those other herbs actually have additional benefits as well. So the CBD muscle balm that Frida Botanicals, my line, has 8 other different herbs in it, along with the CBD. And there's really a synergistic effect where the arnica that's in it also helps the CBD to work. And so you get this really nice cumulative effect. So you get a lot more benefit from it. And I think it smells good.
It smells awesome. Like the smell of your muscle balm is like, I could just smell it. Most people wouldn't say about any kind of CBD product that I just want to sit there and smell it just for the fun of it.
It's aromatherapy.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yours also has a really nice slippage. So like if you're using it to, work on yourself, actually doing some self-massage or somebody else doing it for you, it's got just a nice feel for being able to do that. Yeah,
I agree. And that's super important. I've had ones that are like chunky or runny, or you would not believe how many I've done so much CBD experimentation, all legal, all hemp-based, for anybody who's listening from the DEA.
Right, exactly. Oh my goodness.
So the other question that you asked was kind of as far as the administration routes. I wanted to just quickly say about the sublingual administration of CBD. So it's absorbed not very well from our GI tract. We don't have very efficient absorption. So let's say you take a capsule that's 30 milligrams of CBD. If you just swallow it into your stomach, you're going to get a very small portion of that, usually less than like 20% absorbed into the system.
So you've got to take way more than what you actually want.
Exactly. And it's expensive, right? Like if you're taking 30 milligrams, but you're actually only really getting about 5 milligrams of effect, it's okay. And some people prefer that method just because they don't like the taste of the oil, or, caps are easier to travel with, that kind of thing. But you get a lot more absorption if you do it under the tongue. So I have people hold whatever they're using, whether it's an oil or a water-based, hold it under your tongue for 60 to 90 seconds, and you get a lot of absorption there. And then you swallow it and you get further absorption in your stomach. So you sort of get a rapid acting effect and then a longer lasting effect. So that's typically my preferred method, is the CBD oil under the tongue. But everybody's different. Everybody has different preferences as far as what they like. There's some folks that really feel that water-soluble CBD, that they like that better. I'm not a big fan because CBD is actually a fat, right? So it actually lives and likes fat much more than water. And you know how when you put like olive oil and vinegar together and the oil separates oil and water, right? That's what, if you put CBD in water, it'll make these clumps that are hard to absorb. So what they have to do to make it water soluble is they add chemicals to alter it so that it will stay dissolved in the water. And I don't like just that additional chemical alteration is one more thing that, if you can avoid that extra chemical step, I do prefer that. But some people really prefer the water soluble tends to be like a spray. And some people really like that. So it's not that it's bad. It's just that I kind of feel like, simple is better. And if you can limit that additional chemical step, and sometimes the chemicals, it kind of like burn, I don't know, for me, it like burns my tongue a little bit. Whatever they use to make it water soluble sometimes can be kind of irritating to the sensitive fibromyalgia person. But again, everybody is a little different in what works for them. So I think number one, the best way is topically. That's the easiest, most kind of least hassle, less to worry about. Then the next best option would be sublingual oils under the tongue.
What about things like gummies? I hear a lot of people talking about CBD gummies lately.
So the gummies are basically the same as taking a capsule. It just that it's a little bit more better absorption because you're chewing it up a little bit. So you're getting a little bit of absorption in your mouth, but then it just is absorbing in your stomach the same way a capsule does. I think people like them because they're yummy.
Well, it was Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar.
So I'm like, that's cool. And like, that totally works. So I think of it as the equivalent as taking a capsule.
Right. But in a form like your children's chewable vitamins.
Totally. There is some issues though with kids around gummies. Like you have to be really careful if you've got CBD gummies at home, because kids will be like, oh, great, gummy bears. Or the same thing with, they make marijuana infused that have both THC and CBD. And you read these like horror stories of kids that got into their, parents' THC
medicine.
Gummies. Yeah. And end up, CBD is reasonably safe for kids. It's not, they're just going to feel really relaxed if they get into your CBD gummies, but it could, could cause them some distress. But the THC gummies, that can actually be dangerous. So that's another reason I'm not a huge fan of the gummies, I guess. It just seems like asking for trouble, maybe.
Yeah, I totally could see that, especially if you do have kids at home.
Right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, I know we were talking before I started recording about the fact that there hasn't been CBD research done specifically on fibromyalgia, but we have had some research done on cannabis looking at like the different percentages of CBD and THC and things like that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm happy that we're doing this. Is perfect timing because I just did a blog post about the recent cannabis research that's been done. Because up until 2019, up until just a few months ago, there had been really very little done on looking at cannabis for fibromyalgia. They'd done some like kind of survey type studies where they asked people, there was one back in 2011 where they asked people at pain clinic, hey, do you have fibromyalgia? If so, have you taken cannabis and was it helpful? They've done that kind of study. But up until this year, there hadn't been any where they looked at people as they went along and looked at people over a period of time. So there was just a study that came out of Israel where they had people that were coming to a medical cannabis clinic with fibromyalgia, and then they were started on cannabis, and then they followed them over 6 months to see how they were doing. And 80% of the patients reported clinical improvement. So at least a moderate improvement of their symptoms, which is huge. And to give you a sense of perspective, the studies on Cymbalta or Lyrica, it was like 30% of people reported improvement. So we've got 80%. It's really significant. And people's average pain levels dropped from 8 out of 10 to 5 out of 10. So a drop of 3 points. Pretty good.
Which is also huge.
It is. That's so much better than what we see in studies. The challenge is what they did is they just they just let people use whichever strain of cannabis they felt was right for them. So there's 14 different strains people had access to, and they had all sorts of different ratios. Some were really high in THC and low CBD. Some were high CBD, low THC. Some were, in the middle. So what we don't know, based on this study done in Israel, we don't know what is the right, is there a right ratio that is the best? In my experience clinically, for pain relief, that equal ratio, THC, CBD tends to be the best, but a lot of people can't tolerate it. So then maybe a high CBD, low THC would be better. So that's going to be kind of the next step, is trying to figure out within cannabis, are there good ratios, maybe different ratios for different illnesses. Maybe what somebody with fibromyalgia needs is different than, let's say, rheumatoid arthritis. They did say that the CBD, the strains that were high in CBD helped, people also reported benefit from them. But they didn't have the data to they didn't record, this person had this much benefit and they were on a high CBD. This person had this much benefit and they were on a high THC. They just kind of lumped it all in together. So I think that'll be like the next step, is to figure out, are there specific strains or ratios that are ideal for fibromyalgia? So that's one thing. The other thing is earlier in this year, out of the Netherlands, they did a study where it was, they had people vaporize a high THC, low CBD, a medium range, and then a high CBD, low THC. So the three different kind of ratios: high THC, low THC, middle. They had them vaporize that, and then they tried to gauge how their pressure sensitivity was. So how much pressure it took for them to say "ouch," basically. And what they found is that actually the higher THC ones worked the best. So when they gave people fibromyalgia, had them vaporize a high THC, low CBD strain, they found that really impeded kind of the pain signals going up to the brain. Interestingly, the high CBD version didn't have that same effect. So it does seem to be the THC that has the analgesic component, the pain blocking component, whereas it's the CBD that has some of the other effects, like the more anti-inflammatory, muscle relaxation, sleep improvement, anxiety. What I would love to do, if Lady Gaga can come fund a study, I would love to look at the effects of CBD on sleep. How does CBD affect the sleep of people with fibromyalgia? Does it improve their sleep quality? Do they get more deep sleep? Does it help them to fall asleep more quickly? Does it overall reduce their fatigue, getting that, sleep improvement? That is where it would be really interesting to look at, because clinically, that's what I see. I mean, people report that CBD helps with their sleep, but I'd love to actually really study that and kind of figure out, is there an optimal dose? I mean, right now people just kind of titrate to their effect, but maybe there's a dose that would be pretty consistent for most people with fibromyalgia, and that could be something that maybe down the road, even doctors that don't understand that much about cannabis, they might feel comfortable, if there'd been a study about hemp-based CBD, for example, looking at that for sleep and fibromyalgia, maybe doctors might actually bring it up or feel more comfortable recommending it. So that's kind of my hope. I think research would help to improve the comfort level of doctors with it, and maybe patients too. I mean, people like to know if things have been studied.
Absolutely. And if we can get more precise on the amounts to take for different things, then it'll be a little bit more like the Butterbur studies for migraines, right? Like
exactly.
take this much, this many times a day,
Yes, exactly. Like it would be more medicinal.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Have there been studies on CBD only, or have they all just been cannabis looking at the plant that has it all?
There have been studies looking at CBD only, but not for fibromyalgia. They've looked at other conditions like diabetic neuropathy. They've done a lot of studies on anxiety, PTSD. So there definitely are CBD only studies, but there hasn't been CBD only and fibromyalgia.
What did do you know offhand what they found in some of those studies? Because I was thinking about the anxiety one, like that's definitely something that affects us with fibromyalgia
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
absolutely. Yeah, they found it to be very helpful for anxiety. They did one, it was really interesting. They had a study where people tend to get a lot of anxiety about public speaking. So they did a study where they had people, they split people into two groups, and half of them they gave CBD before they had to do their public speaking, and the other half didn't. And the half that got CBD not only reported feeling less anxious, but their actual biomarkers of anxiety, like heart rate, sweating, things like that, also were down. So it actually really does kind of calm down that fight or flight nervous system, which, in fibromyalgia has kind of gone haywire. So, yes, the studies on anxiety are good. The studies on PTSD are good. Insomnia, it's all shown positive effects. And that's why I think CBD has really gone viral, so to speak, is because it does work. Now, it's not a panacea. And where I get a little worried is if sometimes it seems like on social media, it's, CBD cures cancer and it did this. And, I'm like, it made me grow a foot taller and I lost 20 pounds. And I'm like, you have to have realistic expectations for it. But for anxiety, it's really impressive. I mean, it's my kind of go-to now for anxiety before I give somebody a prescription for an antidepressant or a benzodiazepine. I start them on CBD because if that can give the benefit they need, great. That's so much better than starting yet another medication. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is a good time for me to remind everybody who's listening. We will have links to, I'm going to try to track down all these studies that she's talking about. We'll definitely link to that blog post that you just wrote.
Yeah. And there's 2 blog posts about CBD and all the links are in there. So if you at drlipton.com, all the blogs have my heavily linked to research for your reading.
Excellent. Excellent. So anybody who's interested in that, this is episode 18. So just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/18 and I will have the links to those specific blog posts. But of course you can also go to drlipton.com and you'll find them there too. So what have you seen with your patients as you're working with them? Like, how have you seen their lives changed as they start maybe using some of these products to help with sleep or anxiety or whatever?
So I have done kind of a little mini, human memory is somewhat faulty, particularly foggy memory. So I did a study where I actually looked at 20 of my patients that I had given CBD and looked at the outcome, what they had reported to me, so kind of doing a chart review basically. And what I found is about 2/3 of the folks that I recommended CBD for that were taking it reported some benefit. Some people reported benefit for anxiety, some for sleep, some for pain, some for all three. So 2/3 found some benefit. 1/3, maybe a little bit under 1/3, didn't report any benefit, but also didn't have any side effects. So I feel like the benefits, it's definitely the benefit risk ratio is pretty good. At that point, I had not specified, I didn't break it down to what brand of CBD people were taking. Was it water soluble? Were they vaping it? I didn't break it down like that. And going forward, I'm trying to do that in my documentation so I can really see, like, hey, is topical CBD giving people all the benefit they need, or does it have to be sublingual? Does it have to be vaped? Trying to kind of look at from a scientific perspective what's working for folks. And it's pretty interesting because it doesn't work for everybody, but when it works, it's really pretty impressive. So I think it's worth a try for something that helps 2/3 of the folks that I give it to. I think it's worth a try. I see the biggest benefit for anxiety and insomnia, a more mild pain relieving effect. It's not, if you're looking to CBD to replace a strong analgesic medication like an opioid, you're going to be disappointed because it is not a strong analgesic. If analgesia is what you're going for, you probably be better served by going to a dispensary and getting something that has a little bit of THC in it, because that's your strong painkiller. In general, I'm moving away from opioids to manage pain, and I am trying to encourage people to explore the cannabis derivatives, simply because they are safer, they are less addictive than opioids, and honestly, they're becoming more accessible because it's getting so hard to be prescribed or access opioids. So I think it's, for most folks, it's absolutely worth a try. I do encourage people to talk about it with their doctor, even though it's uncomfortable. I think just like any medication, there can be interactions with other medicines. So for the most part, CBD, hemp-based CBD, is safe to take with almost every medication. But if you are on a medication like a blood thinner, where it's really important that you have like a very narrow window of blood levels, CBD can affect the blood levels of other medications. So if you're on chemotherapy, if you're on a blood thinner, if you're on something where you get your levels measured and it's really important that it be in this precise range, then you absolutely have to get tested before you start CBD and be monitored as you take it. Other than that, I have people take CBD along with basically all of their other typical fibromyalgia medications. There's not, it plays pretty nicely with other medications. But just to be on this side of caution, I definitely recommend people, run it by their doctor to say, hey, could there be an interaction with any medication I'm taking? Unfortunately, your doctor might not have that much information, but maybe your question will prompt them to do some research about it. And then for the next patient, they'll be like, CBD, I've heard of that. And I've done the study. I read the study about it. So a piece of it is we are having to educate our doctors and bring them along into the next century, 2019.
That's right. That's right. And I have to say that what I've seen with my clients is very similar to what you just described. And it's interesting us doing this interview, because one of the things that I'm realizing as we're talking is that my clients who really didn't see any effect from trying CBDs were all taking capsules.
Yeah. Yeah. The capsules are unfortunately not a great test. Yeah. I've actually had I've switched people from the capsule to the oil, and people get totally different results because you're just getting so much more of the medication.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Capsules, it's not great. Not a great way. I mean, it's okay. But.
Right, exactly. You just got to be aware of that difference between what you take and what you are actually getting in your body. So awesome. So I know we're getting close to the end of our time, and there's one last question I have for you, which is for that person who has been listening to this episode and hearing some of these benefits. If they want to maybe try some CBDs, obviously Frida Botanicals is a great place to go. But would you give us some guidelines on how do you know if you're getting the right thing? Because I've also heard lots of stories of people where, the plants, may have even had mold on them, or,
or maybe the product doesn't even have any CBD in it.
Yes, I've also heard that too. Be careful of what you buy. Just like anything, right? Like the story that came out a while back about the supplements they bought at Walgreens or whatever that didn't actually contain what they said they were supposed to contain. This is no different.
Exactly. And that's such a fear of mine. So here's the thing. They did a study a few years ago. Some researchers ordered about 100 different CBD products online and had them tested, third-party tested. So, a separate lab looking at them. About half of the products that they ordered were mislabeled. Either they didn't have any CBD in them when they said they did. They had a lot more CBD than they said they did. They were contaminated with something else, or they had high levels of THC. So there were products that they ordered online that said, that they were hemp-based CBD and they had really high THC. So can you imagine how awful it would be to take something, like I'm going to work, oh, there was something in there that I was not anticipating. So what I recommend across the board is make sure that the product that you're buying is third-party tested. And the company should display on their website the results of the third-party lab testing. And what that should be is looking at how much CBD is in there, how much THC is in there. They should be testing for pesticides and making sure that there's no impurities, nothing like mold. So many fibromyalgia patients are chemically sensitive. And the last thing you want is to get something where you're putting in, something that's laden with pesticides or otherwise contaminated. So the thing to look for is really the third-party testing. And what that means is that the company that's making it can't be the one that's testing it. It has to be a separate company that has no financial relationship to them. I use a company locally called Greenleaf Labs, which is a really great, they do a lot of the cannabis testing for the whole Oregon area. So I get every batch tested and I post those results on the website. So that is becoming more and more standard practice. So I strongly encourage people, whatever product they're buying, to make sure that that information is available to them. And if a company doesn't have that posted, I'd say steer clear and maybe go to a different source.
Excellent. Anything else you would recommend that people look for if they're looking for a good CBD to try? Or is that third-party testing really the main thing?
I think the third-party testing, along with reading reviews, that's pretty standard these days, but you can get some useful information, I think, from that, particularly around taste. I've tried, in my market research, I tried a lot of different CBD oils and tinctures, and some of them, to me, tasted awful. Like they use stevia or other artificial things. Stevia is natural, but they use like artificial sweeteners or weird flavors. And I personally didn't like that. So you also want to make sure that it's something that like the taste is amenable to you. The Frida Botanicals line is just unflavored. It's just oil, coconut oil, and the hemp CBD. So it's unflavored, and I prefer that, but everybody has their own preferences. So I would say third-party testing, and then read reviews on taste so you can make sure that it's something that's palatable for you.
And then I would also recommend that you listen back to the parts where we were talking about the different forms that you can get things in, like, the water soluble, oil soluble, salves, that kind of stuff, and really think about what it is that you're needing it to do for you and how it's going to fit into your life, and, some of that kind of stuff.
And how long you need it to last. Absolutely. So on one of my blogs on drliptan.com, I go into the actual comparison of the different methods. So that could be a good resource for folks as well.
Perfect. We will make sure we link to all those goodies. Awesome. So, and of course, I will say it, if anybody is looking for a good brand, I do definitely recommend Frida Botanicals. I have the muscle balm myself. Like I said, I love it. It sits by my chair. And I put it on when I need to.
It sits by my bed. I put it on every night before bed.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, it smells really good. So you don't have to walk around smelling like a skunk. So
yes, exactly. Thank you, my dear. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Any last minute thoughts for us on the topic?
None on the topic, but I want to say, Tammy, congratulations on a really awesome podcast and episode 18. Woo! Well done.
Thank you so much. And you guys know I've blamed her for this whole thing.
I totally take that blame. And I told you so.
Yes. It was that airplane ride back from the Sacramento walk where you pestered for 2 hours straight.
You were born to do a podcast on fibromyalgia, Tammy.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. And everybody stay tuned. I'm going to do a quick recap at the end here and give you a bunch of links again. So thanks so much. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the end. Remember, all of today's resources, research studies, and links can be found at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/18 for episode 18. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we are doing a very special giveaway of the Frida Botanicals CBD tincture and muscle balm mentioned in this episode. You guys are going to love it. Dr. Liptan and I are also throwing in signed copies of our books for you. This bundle is worth well over $100, and you can win it absolutely free. There is no purchase necessary. All you have to do is visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com/18 and look for the Enter to Win button. Just click on that, fill out the form, and you're set. You can even earn extra entries by sharing the contest with your friends. This contest giveaway is going to run for a month after the episode airs, so be sure to enter right away. Upcoming in future episodes of the Fibromyalgia podcast, we have our special Ask the Coach or Dear Tammy episode, where we are going to be answering the question, is it common to gain weight with fibromyalgia? The short answer to that question is yes. And in our Ask the Coach episode, I'm going to dive in a whole lot deeper and talk about why it's so easy to gain weight with fibromyalgia and why it's not your fault. There's so much going on in your body, and it's kind of surprising if you run across somebody who doesn't gain weight with fibromyalgia. And we're actually going to dive into all of that. We are also in the process of scheduling Dr. Jared Younger to come talk about his fibromyalgia research. He has done a lot of research on inflammation in the brain in fibromyalgia. He was actually the person to discover that, and also on using low-dose naltrexone for fibromyalgia, which those of you who are familiar are excited to hear his research. Those of you who aren't familiar, we're actually going to be talking about that in the episode with him. Now, remember, as always, you never have to stress about taking notes or worry about fibro fog. We've always got you covered with our full show notes and the resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Remember, you can go grab copies of my books for free out there. Of course, these are downloadable electronic copies. If you want that paperback, you're going to want to go enter to win our contest to grab that. You can also, of course, always find it on Amazon. You can also just let me know through the website any questions you have for our Ask the Coach episode. And also, if you are interested in having a consultation with one of our coaches about ways that you can feel better faster. If there's something you'd like me to talk about on the show, if you've got any questions, you can let me know that through the website as well. See you next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. If you're ready to see if working with a fibromyalgia coach can help you feel better faster, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com, where you can schedule a complimentary consultation to explore your options. During this call, we'll discuss your fibromyalgia journey, what your needs and challenges are, and give you recommendations on how to reach your goals the quickest way possible. Thank you for tuning in today, and join us next time as we explore more ways to help you take back control of your life and health. My music and sound editing were done by Daniel Munkus at Subtle Soup Records. Podcast management and creative copy by Sonia Louise of Performance Podcasting.